Well, welcome once again, dear friends. And again, so nice to be with all of you in Pune. And perhaps some of you are joining from other places online. It's my joy to be with all of you this evening, sharing this satsang. And we have a very interesting, very important topic today for the satsang. And this is the power of discrimination in daily life. Discrimination, the ability simply of knowing the right and the wrong in our life, it's very important. But I think there are two parts, when we want to make progress in life of any kind, whether it's spiritual or whether it's other kind of success that we are looking for. Part of the equation is knowing what to do, or knowing what is the right path, what is the right action, what is the right choice when you are faced with two options or multiple options. So that is one part of it, which we are going to be talking about today: discrimination and how to develop it. But then really the other part of the equation is, once you know what is the right thing to do, to act upon it, to put our energy into it. And really, if we all think a little bit, we will realize that very often in life, it is not hard. It is not hard to know really what is the right thing to do. I think because we are, like they say, we are wiser than we know. Deep within, we all know really what is the right thing to do. And, for example, you come home from work, um, and in the evening, you have two choices. Now, should I meditate or should I watch TV for the next hour and then meditate? Well, I think on one level, we all know the answer, and why do we know the answer? Because really, fortunately for all of us on this path, Paramahansa Yogananda ji, Swami Kriyananda ji, they gave so many guidelines, so many, you can say they've laid out the whole lifestyle of what it means to be a truth seeker, a devotee, a yogi, and the specifics of it also. So do this, don't do that. This is the right way to act in this situation. These are the right kind of things to do during your day. Avoid doing these other things. And so, like I said, fortunately, it's not like we have to start from scratch and decide, is this the right thing to do in my day, or is that the right thing to do? Because like I said, Yogananda ji, Swami ji pretty much laid out everything. And so, for example, Master would say, get away, this was in the 1950s. He would say, get away from those televisions. And televisions had just been invented, or I should say, they were launched. And he at one point even said, they have a satanic influence, because they really, more than anything, they distract the mind, they engage the mind. And he said it and prevents the mind from being freer for other higher pursuits, the divine search, meditation. And I think these days I was thinking to myself, um, perhaps we don't watch television too much. I hope we don't. Many of us don't watch it too much. But I think we carry a television in our pockets all the time, the television we call a smartphone. And I can't but help thinking that if Master was around, he would probably give some similar advice. Of course, it's we use those devices and gadgets for communication, but really, I think it's become such a confusing mix now, because the same thing is serving so many purposes that I think the lines have become blurred. And I think discrimination often goes for a toss, that should I be doing this, or is this the time for meditation? Maybe I should do this little more. And often, because of something like that, that's just an example we're all used to, it breeds restlessness, which is what I want to mention is the first thing that takes away our ability to discriminate. When we become restless, then it's much harder to see the right and the right from the wrong. Swami Kriyananda ji, when he first came to Paramahansa Yogananda in his ashram, he recounts in some letters that in his very early years, he had a very interesting certainly it was a struggle, but it was an interesting experience that he found, wherein he said that, he was so much on fire, and this was a good kind of fire. It wasn't, he had dedicated his life to God, to Guru, and he was on just fire for God and Gurus, and doing whatever he could that lay in his power to further their message and teachings. But Swami said that at one point, he became work conscious rather than being service oriented. And I was just, when I was reading that, I could very much relate to it. I think as many of us could relate to, this tendency. And Swami would, it was so gratifying to read. He says, most of the time, he said, thoughts of my work took away thoughts of my Lord. And he said that even in my meditations, I wasn't thinking of God. And when I read that, I said, okay, if Swami could experience that, feel that, there is hope for all of us, because he, of course, overcame that. But from that period of his life, he said something which I want to read to you, because after that experience and other experiences of that sort, he gave himself a mantra, which he said he stuck to for the rest of his life. And this is very important, because if we will do what Swami is mentioning here, we will gain the power to always see right from wrong. And I read now what Swami says. He said, my bottom line for many years has been not money, profit, or outer success of any kind, but inner peace. I have refused to allow myself to become so stressed as to sacrifice that true wealth. And this is interesting. He says, I've even deemed it better, and experience has borne me out, to leave important things undone if my peace might be undermined by giving them attention. For without it, I would be prone to err. From inner peace have come enlightened decisions. People's expectations of me can never equal to what God himself expects. My peace in the thought of him. So very beautiful approach, that he took for himself, which is that he said he made peace his bottom line. And, if the world called upon him, people reached out to him, of course, he did the best he could. But he said many times, he even left seemingly important things, he either didn't do them or put them off for later, if in the moment doing them would mean that he would lose his inner peace. Because he said, if I lost my peace, then for sure I would make the wrong decisions. It might be efficient because I could get many things done, but he said I would be prone to err. But he said, when I have stuck to my inner peace, there from that enlightened decisions have come. And so this is something to keep in our minds, when we want to develop this quality of very quickly and very clearly seeing right from wrong. How do we do it? By preserving our inner peace. And Swami would often say, as Yogananda ji would also say, and this is something I have myself been trying to practice more these days, just the very simple practice of keeping more silence. Now, we have to remind ourselves again and again of this. On one level, we have all, because of work or whatever, we have to speak so much. But Swami wrote somewhere, he said, speak if you can improve upon silence. And it's an interesting thought to keep in mind, that it's not like we're saying don't speak, but always to be centered and feel that speaking when it's necessary. And when Yogananda ji was in Sri Yukteswar's ashram, he basically, Swami recounts, kept to himself, wouldn't speak much to other people, kept his mind all day at the spiritual eye. And Swami said that's really how Master was able to gain the power to be able to do everything that he did later on in life. And Swami too, if you'll remember, recounts that when he came to Yogananda Ji's ashram, he had so many questions, how does this work and the techniques and meditation. And he said he sometimes would go to Master and he would ask Master something and Master would not even reply to him because perhaps he saw he was coming from a space of just wanting to talk. And like Swami said, Master would not encourage other disciples to speak around him. And so, just to say, why is this important for us when we are talking about discrimination? Because, Yogananda ji said, thoughts are universally, not individually rooted, which is to say, we receive thoughts, we don't create thoughts. And when we are in our life, in a dilemma, should I do this? Should I do that? What is our greatest need at that time? Well, it very simply is, don't we want to in that moment, we wish, we hope, we just get the right thought in that moment. Do this, isn't it? And that ability is an ability of receiving the thought. Those higher thoughts come to us from higher sources that we don't have control over so much. But we can really do it if we are calm, like Yogananda ji said, if we are in that listening mode, if we are in that receptive mode, and if we are not always speaking either verbally or even if our mind isn't speaking all the time, which, like I said, you can be silent verbally, from the mouth, but our minds could be racing all over the place. And so, one very beautiful technique Yogananda ji gave, which really he said after meditation, he said this is the most important technique if you want to progress rapidly on the spiritual path. But this technique, and we perhaps all know it, he said, keep your mind here all as much as possible all throughout the day, which is to say, keep your mind here at the spiritual eye as much as you can. And yes, it will help us make spiritual progress, but I was thinking, it will also help us discriminate. It will also help us to know exactly in those situations, is this right or is that right? And how does it do that? Very simply, we know that when we are gazing here, when we are concentrating here, inwardly our energy, is rising. It is lifting from the lower centers in the body, the lower chakras, and we are lifting it to the higher, to the higher centers of consciousness in the body. Now, in that very act, what are we doing? Well, again, Master said, Yogananda ji said that, the kind of thoughts we have, if you have negative thoughts, if you have thoughts of doubt, if you have thoughts of insecurities, he explained that why do you have those? We are attracting those thoughts to ourselves because our energy is actually centered in the lower centers, in the lower chakras, and mainly in the lower three chakras. So because the energy perhaps is in those regions more, we attract the kind of thoughts that correspond with that energy. And so just tells us that if we want to attract higher thoughts, and in our case, if we want to attract solutions, very clear, this is the right answer, this is the right way to respond, this is the right path to take in this situation, then if we want those kinds of right thoughts, then really the secret is not so much to try to outwardly create those thoughts, but to lift our energy, raise our energy to, like I said, the higher chakras. And that is why Master said, if you concentrate here and keep your mind here as much as you can throughout the day, you're really making sure that your energy doesn't drop and it stays at the higher center. And that will really, without anything else, it will attract to you the right answers, the right solutions. So let's try this, friends, this simple technique of just one, being more silent, inwardly, outwardly as much as possible, being receptive, and combine this, with this simple technique of just uplifting our gaze, keeping our mind focused there. There is one other thing that when I was reading from the Gita on this subject of discrimination, that Swamiji mentioned, and he said, discriminations also, discrimination rather is lost because of two things in particular. One, he said, is self-will. When we think we want to practice our own will to the exclusion of what God wants from us, so that is one thing. And secondly, he says it is the likes and dislikes of the heart. And he said, what happens is, let's say you see a nice, beautiful car, you're walking on the road, and perhaps you've been thinking, what car should I get? I need a new car. And you see this beautiful, swanky car on the road. And suddenly, maybe your, heart's energy lifts, and because it shoots up the spine, and you feel, maybe that's the car I need to buy. And this is very natural. It happens to all of us, not just for a car, but according to what our mind wants, different desires. It could be when we walk into a shopping mall, it could be when we see a person, it could be whatever. The energy shoots or leaps up in the spine, but we think that that is the thing that we want. And Swami says that's where we have to be very, very careful, because we can deceive ourselves. We can think that is the right thing for us, but he said that is really, if we want to really know what is right for us, if that thing, that object, that person, that action, if it is right for us, the energy should just not be leaping upward, it should also be calm. And there should be a calmness, um, there should be a calm quality to that energy. Just as an example, if you're at work, and let's say you receive an email from someone, and let's say it's a nasty email, it's an unkind email, if it's accusatory, or let's say you're talking to someone and they say something like that, or they send you a message like that, what is our first tendency? It's to react, isn't it? And it could be that that person is speaking the truth. Maybe they're saying, this company is, I just see it clearly, you all are taking it down, and the right thing for us to do is, open a branch in this part of town, and that is the solution. But maybe because they say it in a state of emotion, and they say it to you perhaps in a way that is not very kind, what is our first instinctive reaction? We try to react, or we become contractive, we try to defend, we don't feel good about it. But what is happening? And out of that, what do we do further? Unfortunately, maybe we put down their suggestion and we say, no, you're not right. You're wrong about that suggestion. But really, what is happening here? It is the right thing they are suggesting, but because we have not gained that ability to be calm, we have allowed our likes and dislikes, the vritti, the chitta has been disturbed, we have lost perspective. We have lost the ability which comes with calmness to see right from wrong. Because if we had that calmness, if we had that peace, if we could depersonalize that circumstance, not take it personally, we would still be able to listen to what they're saying, read that email, but we would say, that is the right solution, in fact. So it depends a lot on our ability to stay calm, to preserve our peace, to not be biased by our own likes and dislikes. And really, in that way, you can always see that either this is right or that is right. And finally, I thought I'll share just a very, something that we all know, that we all practice, that sometimes, despite all that we do, all that we practice, it is hard sometimes to know right from wrong. You are in a situation, you can't decide, maybe you're agitated. And so Yoganandaji simply said, pray to God. Try to achieve a degree of calmness as much as is possible for you in that situation, and pray again, concentrating here, keeping the heart open. And Master said that if you pray, where Babaji has the power to put thoughts in our mind, so do all the other great ones. And if you pray with sincerity, who knows, they will just throw the right thought in your mind or guide you in some other way. I one time I was And I do this often, maybe I've shared this before, that when I'm in a dilemma and I just cannot decide whether to do this or to do that, I hold a question in my mind, and these are specific questions. And then I sit with the autobiography of a yogi and I say that I'm going to open a page at random, and whatever it comes, that should be the answer that you're trying to tell me. And I just can't tell you how many times it has worked. Sometimes just very uncanny, because it's been very, very specific advice. So I would say try that also. One time I had a desire to go to Kolkata for Durga Puja, and this was in March. Durga Puja is in the fall of the year, and I had this strong desire, and I said, but I couldn't make up my mind. I was like, is this a desire? But it's a good desire, but maybe I shouldn't have this desire and I should do what God wants. So naturally, I was very confused. And in that moment, I tried this trick and I opened the book and I said, Master, please tell me what is the answer. And I opened the book, and the line that my eye fell on was basically this. It said, I was forced to return to Bengal for the fall term of Serampore College. And I just took that as a sign that perhaps you'll be going to Bengal, you'll be forced to go to Bengal. Durga Puja happens in the fall, like I said, in the later part of the year. And I said, okay, maybe I'll take that as a sign. It's anyways a harmless desire. It's a good desire. I want to spend time, around devotees and in that vibration. And so I did in the fall that year go to Kolkata. But just to say that through all these ways, calmness, keeping our mind uplifted, praying to the gurus, keeping our likes and dislikes as much as we can aside, being in a giving flow, because often we cannot decide a path whether it's right or wrong for the simple reason that we are too involved in it. So if you're thinking, if you're expansive, if you pray, not what I want, but what do you want, then often the answers can come. So this is just a little bit on how to gain this power of discrimination in daily life. And I hope we can practice some of these things, small things in our own life, and, just apply these things to our daily life. Thank you all for joining.